Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cafecito Con Conciencia. This is David Solis, and I'm here with Susy Amezcua and Leo Rodriguez. And we're happy that you all are joining us once again. And I hope that by this time you got your little cup of cafecito ready. You've picked your spot at home, at work, wherever it is you're at, and you're ready to dive into these conversations with us. So, just to get us started, how are we feeling today, folks? ¿Cómo están?
Not gonna lie, it's been a little stressful, overwhelming week, pero I'm excited to be here with all of you. Just to again just engage in some platicas, and I really do appreciate just being here in this space. So welcome everyone, and thank you for listening to Cafecito con Conciencia.
Yeah, thank you for following us in our episode journey. We're doing this in our time. Having a rough week from work, but we managed to pull through and pull this out for you so you can listen in on just some individuals talking about different subjects.
Yeah, folks, y'all, it's been a long week, right? And it's just great to be here with y'all. Um y'all, for those of you who are listening, you don't know how much we laugh before we even get started. I think we've just spent the whole almost hour trying to get started, and it's just puro relajo. So maybe one day we'll post a video with the bloopers and stuff. But anyways, we're gonna dive into our conversation today. And our guiding question is: how has power dynamics played a role in your personal or professional life? Right. And I think, at some point we've all experienced it, right? Where it's just two people clashing for whatever reason, right? And this is not only political. This is, at the personal level. It could be at work. It could be with, I don't know, maybe your friends, uh, with, just about anywhere, right? So I think, I don't know. I think for me, at the professional level, it's I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen with a couple folks who they have a certain title, right, or they have a certain position, and it's just like, se creen la gran cosa, right, and it's just they let that dictate, their persona and their character, and también, in academia, it's like that BA or MA or PhD after your name, some people really take it too hard, and it's just like, oh, don't call me David, call me Doctor, right? So Doctor Solis, because I worked so hard for that PhD, you know, or I don't know. Those that's just, a couple places that I've seen it. I don't know about ustedes. What do y'all think? Come on in.
Well, I do definitely see that when, and as far as education stands, is that power to the people who made it to that far, because sometimes it takes them for a lot of years. There's a lot of challenges they have to overcome to get that PhD. So, power to them. But I do see that some people do get caught up in that. I was like, oh, I'm here now. I'm not going to meet you at your level anymore because I've did my time. And I mean, connecting it to like a work experience, like power dynamics, it's in itself when you have a certain person that's above your level, let's say a tier two or something like that, because they have more experience and all that. I understand that, they've done their time, that's why they've moved up, or they just fill the role because they don't have that knowledge. But then they also get caught up in the sense that they think that they're better than you, and they don't want to help you at some point. They're like, oh, I they can do it by themselves. They can do their own research. I won't help them. So that doesn't even help uplift the other person that's, let's say, below them.
Yeah, I definitely agree with both of you, David and Leo. I definitely seen just like power trips. People having power trips, and I think also it has to do with like your positionality, right? I think some people might see it or experienced it more than others. Other people might not even like, what are you talking about? Like everyone treats each other equally, or like everyone collaborates the same way, So I think definitely, as a brown mujer, like I think my first time I dealt with any power dynamics was like when I was organizing in Mecha, at CSUN, and I was just, kind of surprised because I was like, okay, I'm gonna quote unquote woke space, right? Where everyone's like equality, justice, and no to racism and no to deportations, but oh, it's okay to be sexist, right? It's okay to be homophobic. It's okay to like to have like certain roles for certain people, just based on positionality. So and it's like, I think what both of you, just highlighted, just it's just crazy, power gets it's crazy how power can get to people's minds, and you kind of like, if you're not careful, like power really can hurt someone, and can really hurt like the relationship that you build with people, or like the relationship that you destroy, so definitely something that I witness a lot.
Well, what I see that occurs because of this problem that separates people and gives people that the let's say the power or some sort, or let's say the title. Actually, that's a better term to put it. The title, to put down the other person just because they've reached this certain level in their work or at school or something like that. I mean, I can also connect it to even family members or something like that. That whenever this person gets a new car or this person just moved to a new house, that they're at this level now. That's what they feel like, and they were before they were at a certain level, but now that they've what they consider moved up, they're like, oh, I'm never gonna be, let's say, shopping at that same place, or I won't wear that type of brand anymore. It's like I feel like it's kind of like those levels where people think, oh, I've reached a certain status and I won't buy that anymore. I'm not associated with that anymore because I'm over here now.
That's a trip right there. Um, it's a trip to me, because I don't know. I think y'all talk about two really good experiences. One is organizing on campus, right? With Mecha, and it was noticeable, right? When I transferred there back in 2014. Um, I attended a couple of the meetings. I was never really fully involved, and I never took on a leadership role or anything like that. But what I like to do is I like to observe, right? I like to see what's going on. I like to see how people approach each other. I like to see, just the flow of how things is, or how things are in the environment y todo eso. Um, so one time I did ask one of the folks, right, who had during that time a leadership position, why doesn't Mecha collaborate with other organizations, right? And particularly with Causa, right, which is another student organization at Northridge, right, Central American Studies, right. Um, and I asked that same question to the folks from Causa, right? Why is there no collaboration, between both? Like, I get it. It's two different entities, right? But similar goals, similar objectives, right? And I think I don't know. I feel like I got the sense of like people were trying to overdo one another, right? And it's just I saw that a lot, and not just at Northridge, but I saw it in the neighborhood too when I was organizing, a couple years back, where I would ask leaders of organizations, and ask them like, why don't you work with X, Y, and Z? Right? And I would never get a response. And I would ask the same question to that folks, right? Why don't you work with, so and so from this org? And some folks were straight honest and they were like, well, you know what? They don't like it when they're not the face of the movement, right? Or they don't like it when, they're not leading, right? Or things like that. So people would actually, I think that's one of the biggest flaws that we see in the community, right? And not just in the community and at work in the workspace too, and at home, right? Because we see it in the movement where it's like everybody's trying to outdo each other, right? And be the face, be the forefront, have their political platform, be the driven force, you know? And we see it at work where people are just like, if I have this title, then you got to respect me, right? If I have this degree, then you got to respect me. And 9 times out of 10, there's somebody who doesn't have that degree, who knows his stuff, who knows how to do the work, who can deliver, right? And it's just a simple fact that the title, the degree is not there. That's it, But the experience that this person has acquired throughout the years, right, does not mean that they're not capable of being at somebody's level, so to speak, right? And at home, it's interesting también because it's like people see you. moving up, getting new positions, getting promotions, and all these things. And it's like, oh, ¿viste a fulanito de tal? Like, o escuchaste que el hijo o la hija de X, Y, and Z, like, and it's like these things, it's like, how come, we always gotta like try to outplay one another? I think that's interesting to me to see, in our neighborhoods, and even more in our families, right? And Leo, like, it's a trip because you're talking about, like, ya no voy a comprar en estos lugares in X, Y, and Z. And I'm over here like, man, I'm still gonna go to Los Callejones in downtown so I can get my pantalones for $20, So, I don't know. I think it's just a trip. So power dynamics.
Yeah. I think sometimes too, like I think ego has a lot to do with it, and I think just in general, like a lot of times, like for example, like when there's beef in the family, right? And the beef kind of just is passed along, generation after generation. Who started it? No sé. What happened? Sepalo. Like what happened? Who started it? Who was responsible? Who hurt? Like, and at the end, it's just everybody is hurt, and everybody has their own interpretation, and that's never questioned, right? And because of that, there's no like no one is extending the hand, no one is like talking to someone else, someone don't talk to so and so porque they did this, so it's just like, and I think that you see that a lot también, like not just in family, but that same mentality where sometimes in systems and institutions, right, it'll be something that happened, and then like for example, in orgs, there's something that happened, some history that happened, and that that space is still there. No one really questions it. No one really kind of like wants to like seek answers. And I think that's what does harm. That's what does harm to like if anyone's trying to collaborate, or if any, if you're in a family that has beef with another, with another part of your family, like well, you're gonna go to your other family and be like, hey, I'm sorry. It's like no, like no one's gonna do that. My sister does though. My sister, she's a tough one. She will be the one that will go show up to the next fam, to my other part of my family and be like, yo, why is there beef? Like, why don't you like, why is this happening? But not everyone is like that, right? So I think definitely like that pattern, exists.
Yeah, because then what that creates is just like, oh, let's just leave it as is and we won't talk anymore.
Hmm.
And then it creates that divide, which is like that space where it's like, oh, why isn't it that you don't talk to them or you don't look at them, you don't look that way or something? And it's like we just don't.
Yeah, and again, that's family. That same pattern exists, right? Even like at work, right? Like is and at work is not is more like going back to what y'all were saying, like your title. Your title gives people certain power, and a veces that power makes people like not want to like ask for help for whatever reason, right? Maybe they're embarrassed, and because they have that power, they feel like they should know everything. But a veces too, like I work in education. It's a field of teachers who a lot of them like that power. They like being in front of the classroom and knowing all the answers, and uh, saying, "I know oh, you're gonna do this because I say so, because I have a credential." Unfortunately, that's the reality where majority of the teachers think that way. You're not gonna find other teachers that are like, you know what? What do you think? How do you feel? Asking students for feedback. Um, and again, there's just like power, right? They feel like because they have a credential, then they know everything. And then of course then we wonder why our education is so messed up if we're never incorporating parents, guardians, students into the mix.
Touching base off of that is just like I mean, it's good that they have that knowledge, but it's another thing being a leader and uniting the people around them and teaching them what they know too. Because if that's not shown and it's just like, oh, I'm gonna keep this for myself, but you're gonna listen to what I have to say and not be a leader and show them and guide them of what this route to take or some advice, then what good does all that knowledge do to them in the first place?
I think that that's a key point right now, Leo, that you brought up. with Odyssey, it's gonna sound kind of cliche, but right. But with power, and no, I'm not Spider-Man, but with power comes great responsibility, right? And but it's the reality, It's like you have the power to become a leader, right? You have the power to influence people. You have the power to guide people. You have the power to shape people, right? You have the power to teach people more than anything, to share the knowledge that you've gained throughout your years, right? Your career, and just share it and pass it along to other folks, right? So they can become the better version of themselves. And they themselves can go back to their community, at work, at school, whatever space they're using, they could go back and just make plant that garden, right? And water it. And in a year, 2 years times, you're gonna see the results. You're gonna see a beautiful garden with so many flowers, so many trees, and all these other beautiful things that are happening, right? And it's so beautiful to see that happen. When you have leadership that are willing to shape and mold you, and take the time to do it, right? Not everybody does it. um and I think it's just a trip for me, the way I see the power dynamics play out in all these different spaces, you know at school, organizing, at work. It's just interesting to see it, right? Because I think every space has at least one individual who's power hungry, right? And they want to have a title, they want to have a seat, they want to be influential, right? But then what happens next? What happens after you have that, right? And I think in our last episode, when we were talking about politics, and electing the right people into spaces, it's like, how do we hold you accountable now, right? How do we make sure that the next council member in our own district, or LAUSD representative, or mayor, or county supervisor, right, district attorney, how do we hold these people accountable, right? How do we make sure that once they're in that seat, it's not like, oh, well, you know what, I'm not going to do it, right? And I'm going to approve projects that are going to gentrify the community, right? And I'm going to approve a higher budget for the LAPD, right? And I'm going to make sure that the kids in our schools don't have the materials, the supplies, the technology, the books, the resources that they need to thrive, right? How do we hold these people accountable? And I think it's more than just phone banking and emailing, right? I think it's making sure that the next person who takes that seat is somebody from the community, somebody who has ties to a grassroots organization, right? Somebody who's gonna have people in his team or her team that actually have other members of the community, right? And that they can, hold this person to his word or her word, right? So I think, to me, it's just seeing all of that play out. And it ties back to work, to relationships at home, right? How do I hold my parents accountable so that way, they don't use slurs, or my brother, so he doesn't pick up on the machismo, that's been kind of just passed on, for generations, right? How do we break all these cycles? So power, man. I don't know.
I think it's something that, like, I feel like, people might feel like, oh, when we think of power, we think of like you just mentioned, like, elections, like the president, like big leadership positions, right? But I think everyone, in whatever capacity, holds some sort of power, right? And I think already knowing that is already step one. You mentioned step two, accountability. I think that is huge. And I feel like that's something that people, like, don't do it enough, and I think the people that do it a lot, hold people accountable, I think they're getting tired, and when you get tired of saying the same thing to the same person, or like, it just becomes emotional labor that you're no longer wanting to invest anymore, and I think, I'm just thinking right now about, like, my group of friends, um, that I feel like it comes in your circle, you start with your inner circle, and I feel like I witnessed too many people, allow their close friend or allow a family member say some crazy shit, or get away with some crazy shit. And they'll hold everybody else accountable but that person. So I think, kind of like what you're saying, like, what do we do? I think, again, even if it's like a friend, a colleague, a family member, having courageous conversations, right? Letting them know, like, hey, you messed up there, and you gotta apologize, or you gotta own what what you did, or hey, you're not stepping enough, but you're talking in all the meetings, so uh so again, like, accountability, but I feel like it starts with your inner circle. And if your inner circle, your closest friends, are allowing you to like get away with that stuff, then they don't care about you. I guess that's what I think. Like, if you really love someone, you're gonna make sure if they made a fool out of themselves, I'm gonna make sure I go and check in with you and be like, yo, ¿qué pasó? Like, that's not you. And I don't want, again, my person that I love the most, I don't want them to make a fool out of themselves. And because I know who they really are, and that's not the perception that everyone sees. And I think, and again, you're just talking about accountability, and I think that's something that people are scared of.
Wow. That was, yeah. That's perfectly well said. You know, holding from, well, both for both of you, both of you said that accountability, because once that person's in that position that they wanted so much, now is the time to shine, present, and unite the community for what they stood for. Now that they're in that position, and show the true leadership that they wanted to achieve. But then I also think that there's like a lot of factors that play into every person's life, because I mean everyone's grows up differently, different set of rules from start at home, from childhood, so they have a different value set that they're given. And then it's interesting because then that's challenged whenever you go out through to like a daily life. Let's say you go out with friends, some certain values are challenged in that space that you're currently in, or even when you're at school. Some of those values that you have in mind you were taught as a little kid are challenged in the classroom. So I feel like you slowly start to find yourself, going through elementary school, middle school. You start finding what is a certain value set that you want to keep, and especially if you have people who have knowledge in those spaces and they lead you in the right path because they want to give back to the community. I think that's where we have a certain level of people who think around the same way and for the betterment, from to give back to from where they came from.
And Leo, you that question, like giving back, and up until like, when does that? Because I feel like sometimes, or at least, again, I see this in teachers, right? Giving back. They became teachers because they wanted to give back, but a veces, like, they think they know everything, and that's what they're giving back.
Oh yeah, that's very true.
I don't know. What do you think? Like, what do you think about, like? Because I feel like sometimes when we think of like, oh, giving back, it means that we know everything, and that's what we're giving back. When do we kind of like pause? And it's not necessarily about like giving back, but more of like fulfilling a duty that you have because you have the opportunity to continue to keep those doors open for someone else. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So
it
like,
does.
I think those are two different, and this can be for David too. I think, again, I just, a lot of people times I hear the phrase like you said, giving back, giving back, giving back. But sometimes giving back is not like, it's not as productive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does.
And we might not have an answer to it. I think, I just hear those words a lot, and and with some of my colleagues who are now teachers or educators or in some sort of education field, they want to give back, but they're the same teachers who are, still suspending our black and brown kids, who are still, you know, uh, think that it's the parent guardian's fault for why students are failing that class. But their defense is that they're giving back. That's why they became teachers.
No, and I appreciate you bringing that up. You know, that's exactly why we have these talks. To have that perspective, and that's really true. I didn't have that perspective before.
I'm trying to think, because I've always been one to use that phrase, you know. Um, I've always told people you got to give back to your community, you know. You gotta go back to your community, right? Um, but you bring up a good question. That's definitely a good question. Like, I think at some point, you, the individual, has to come to the conclusion that maybe your time as a leader and in that position that you currently hold, maybe your time is up, right? And maybe it's time for you to let the next person to lead, or let the next generation to take over, right? And I think a lot of people are fearful of just letting go of the power that they've had for years, the influence that they play in people's lives in the communities, right? Because they worked, like you said, Susie and Leo, you worked all your life for it. For organizers, they've organized for years. For folks who are in academia and they get that master's and they get that PhD, is like, how much time did they not spend? And not alone, not just the time, but it's like the amount of times that you cried while you were trying to write that research paper, at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, right? And reading those books, right? So it's like, maybe, for organizers in particular, you need to understand that when your movement is no longer a reflection of what the community needs, and is addressing the needs of the community, and it doesn't have leadership that looks like the community, then it's your time to pass on that baton. It's your time to say, hey, let me look at the next leader and let me help him or her, right? And let me make sure that that person has all the tools, the resources, the knowledge that they need to make this organization grow and be better than what it was or it has been. And same thing with the family dynamics, right? Like, I have conversations with my younger brother all the time, more often now than what we did before. And it's because we want to break cycles of machismo, right? And we want to be better, right? So we're not looking at each other as, I'm going to be better than you and I'm going to be the better son, right? Than or the better sibling, right? Uh, No, it's like, let's have these conversations about, how do we support one another? How do I support your dreams and how do you support my dreams, right? And I think it's difficult to get to that point, right? And saying, my idea of giving back is no longer working. It's really difficult to get to that point, and I think a lot of folks, maybe fear is what's holding them back from saying, or getting that personal conversation, with themselves, and saying, hey, ya estoy viejito or viejita, ya se me acabó mi tiempo, like, I don't know. That's a good question though. I really like that.
And and I had a really good conversation with my brother the other day. He just turned 18, and as someone who, like, you know organized around, like, in different communities, and now, like, just focusing in education, right, and like creating, a place where students can learn and feel comfortable. I think I always say that I can check off the box of, like, I'm doing my responsibility of being a social justice educator, right? Like, I'm like, okay, check the experience, I'm advocating, check, 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 right? And then he tells me, he was like, like, it just is just so, what did he say? He was like, no, like, your generation, and he's talking about people at my age, like, he's like, your generation is just, okay, you just go protest, and you just, then after that you go to, what happens after that, like, you go to a protest and then you go to Denny's. Or, like, he's like, so, and even, like, older people, he was like saying, like, older people too, like, they fought for all these different movements, and they marched and they got arrested, and but things are still worse now. So it's like, now, and then y'all, like, blame the younger generation, saying like, well, y'all don't care, but, well, how are we supposed to change everything that y'all didn't do? And now we have Trump as president, and y'all allow that to happen. And I was just in the car driving, I was like, oh, what? Okay, I'm like, I'm an organizer, I'm a social justice, like, person, like, I advocate for, for young people, but he is a young person, 18 years old, who's fed up, who's fed up. And again, like what you just said, it's hard for people. Like for me, I thought I'm doing everything I can, but obviously no. Like it's not, as like what you said, at some point it's like, okay, like we need there, like, I mean, this is what, like, the Black Lives Matter and everything that's happened, it's young people led, right? These are young people who went into the streets and, like, took it upon themselves to advocate for George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and everybody else who has been, killed by law enforcement. And this is young people, so it's like they're saying, like, they're fed up, right? And what now, but I appreciate what he shared, because, like, sometimes I didn't know that, I didn't, if he didn't tell me that, then I would still think in my mind that, oh no, we're doing everything we can, so.
That's a pretty impactful conversation, and it's just it puts you to think. It really does, because it's just, for somebody to tell you like you've been organizing and yet things hasn't haven't changed, like that's a reflection moment. That's a moment where, sure, like you think, you look back at everything you did and it's just like, did I really do everything, like you mentioned? And I don't know, for me I haven't organized in years. I want to say that it's about to be 3 years, if not a little more, and it's just, I'm not ready to go back. I really am not. During the protest, I thought about it. Let me go. Let me show up. Right. Let me show up. Let me let me just scream it out to the world. That I'm not happy. That I'm not satisfied with the decisions. That are taking place. But it's like, I'm not ready. And it's like, I can't advocate for the community if I'm not 100%. You know, I can't show up for you if I'm not doing well, right? Or if there's things that I got to take care of home, and I get it, everybody does, right? But I think this time around, it's like we're all in a pandemic, and it's like we got to figure out, how do we do it, right? How do we voice our concerns? How do we just scream it to the world, that we want change while also taking care of the family, right? And it's just like, this is why, to me, it's like, it's important, to have that conversation with yourself, right? And I'm about to be 30, but maybe my earlier years were my best years, and I did everything that I can to help out youth apply to college, right? And submit their FAFSAs and their dream acts, and take them to the college that they had to be for an interview, right? Maybe those were my best years, right? Where I was able to do that and support them in that way, right? And maybe now it's time for me to find folks who would want to learn something from me, right? And for me to say, okay, let me show you what I did, right? And let me share what I did. And if it works for you, cool. And if it doesn't, let's tweak it around and make it work, right? So that way you can have a better outcome than what I did, right? And but yeah, no, I think organizing and even with family, getting family to get out of their comfort zone, and break those dynamics is challenging sometimes. you know um some people might not want to go to college, right? Some people might not want to pursue a similar path as we all did, but it's like, I think at some point it's like, cool, then how do I help you, right? But I think it's that fear of like, let me get out of my comfort zone and challenge these power dynamics that are at home, right? And I've seen it with my kids, when I help them out, it's like las mujeres, right? Like they have a hard time going to college because mom and dad don't want her to go, right? They don't want her to go to a school that's 2 hours away, right? So imagine someone who has to go 8 hours away. It's challenging, right? So it's those power dynamics at home también that you got to challenge and be like, hey, you know what? This is the best thing for me, right? So it's like kind of just helping them advocate and roll it all out and be like, hey, you know what? You got to show your parents that you're prepared. You got to show your parents that you're going to have money for school, that you're going to have money for room and board, that you won't go hungry, right? So it's like, it's all those things. I don't know. I think it's, again, it's interesting to see how it all plays out, in every part of our lives. So
Yeah, and like you said, challenge gender roles, right? The reason why mom and dad don't let her go to college because she has to stay home and take care of the family and like, and get a husband and marry and start a family at 17 or as soon as she graduates high school, right? But it's okay if like the brother can spend 20 years exploring his dreams, right? That's perfectly okay.
that's the stuff that we got to change, and it's just like doesn't roll that way no more, right? I think as us, who are a little bit more aware, of the shift that's going on, and we're challenging these things ourselves, is like, nah, not gonna happen, right? And how we present it to people, I think that's the important piece. You as an educator, Susie, and right, it's just how do you present it, right? How do you teach your kids to advocate and say, hey, tell you got to show your parents that you're responsible enough, right? And even then, it's just like challenge it because it's not right, and that's it. So
Yeah, and then touching upon that idea that there's a certain there's a certain role that a woman or man should before going like to school, like their parents tell them, "Oh no, go work. Why are you gonna waste your time studying reading? When you can be making money now. You know, that's one thing I remember seeing when I was in high school, and then also too that like they would want the daughter to stay home and take care of their younger brother or sister because their parents were out at work. you know so it's one of those things where like in that moment maybe that the family might be going through something, so it's like they have to respond. They're families, they have to support each other, and then it's all right for those to not go immediately to school. It's just like one of those things where it's okay if you went to school, let's say 3 years later after high school. You don't have to go directly after high school. That's the idea. That would be the perfect way to do it. But it's just in that moment when they're in high school, is like you don't know what kind of things they're going through. Everyone's going through different things, so it's like it's just in that moment. So many things are thrown at you, so it's like you want to, but this is the now. But you can eventually get there. Not saying you never will. It's just interesting and it's mind blowing. Like different things, the different life experiences people go through in just from growing up to like when they're 20. So many things happen to different people, and it's just very interesting to see how everyone's
Mhm.
shaped and what values they carry at that age.
And not even, yeah, I think you just mentioned like people go through so many things, and acknowledge that sometimes that is called trauma, right? Some of us are our experiences led to us, either dismissing or like trying to hide something that happened, and that trauma just keeps on coming up. And I feel like you mentioned Leo earlier in the podcast, like in the talk, like you were saying, that's why certain people, are more willing to be vocal. Other people are more willing to like just listen and observe, so I think when sometimes when we don't acknowledge our trauma and we don't, kind of explore that, then I think that's why like some people have like a, more of a challenge to like advocating for themselves, or more of a challenge to like self-reflect, or more of a challenge to like collaborate with other people, or more of a challenge to like ask for help, right? Because of trauma that we have not addressed.
Yeah, and it's like one of those where it's like you hear from higher up, they say, "Oh, everyone can do it as long as you put your mind to it. No, like in the in the moment, you don't know what everyone's going through. No one has the same resources other people do. So when there's no support, you have to fend for yourself. You have to survive. That's basically what it feels like at times, where you're just like, oh, here you go, good luck. So it's even like right now, like there's some people who aren't employed. They lost their job, or their work isn't coming in as it used to be. But when there's no support, it's like, you people some people lose their mind. People, because they lose everything. They lose, they can't pay bills, so that everything is, papers are coming up and everything. It's like that stress again, like you said, that trauma. Perfect word to say it. Um, it's a lot of things that I feel like that shape people. And then and then on top of all this stuff, that like bills, and then let's say one family member gets sick, so then it's like, it's all in your head. And then you just can't find, let's say, like, you no puede encontrar la puerta, you can't find an exit.
Hmm. And that's crazy porque today, this morning, I've been doing this lesson with my students, my advisory students, about, because a lot of them share that they're feeling stressed, right? So these are eighth graders doing distance learning, and they're sharing that they're really, really stressed out, and they are dealing with a lot of anxiety. And we talked about, just how our works when we're under stress, and how some of us will either fight, others will flight, or others would freeze. And when I asked them, like, which one are you, which category do you fall into, and all these eighth graders, like majority of them were like freeze. I would just close the laptop and go to sleep, and then wake up the next day and see that there's 20 missing assignments that I have to do, and that anxiety just picks up. So David, you asked, like, how do we teach our young people to advocate? I think one is to, like, definitely provide them the tools, like the curriculum that a lot of us were exposed to. I think the three of us shared earlier in our first podcast that we didn't learn about ourselves until we got to higher ed. We didn't learn about trauma until we didn't learn we were hurting until higher ed. I didn't learn I was hurting, or that my family was like poor, or that, I didn't learn all that until we had to like reflect about our experiences, and like, and then we started learning like vocabulary that named our oppression, but I think that's step one. But I think step two, um I think, young people are very observant. And I know if you work with kids, this is true, right? Young people are very observant. They mimic what they see adults do, and this is something that I've constantly, at work, I'm always advocating, because like we're advocating, for example, we're advocating how to use restorative language with our students, right? But if like teachers are cussing each other out, or if teachers are being disrespectful in front of kids, or if teachers are like not even acknowledging other teachers as they're walking by in front of students, like, how are we supposed to teach young people how to be restorative, or how to build relationships from within themselves, if teachers can't even model that? So I think, again, they are very observant to what we do. So they will pick up who has beef with who. They will pick up who is the one that's like, oh, if I tell this person good things or compliments or whatever, then they'll leave me alone.
And I think, Susie, you nailed it when you said you got to open up the space for them to give you feedback. You know, and I get it. Kids right now are being bombarded with all these assignments, right? And the best that we can probably do is take a step back and let the kids, process everything that's going on, because none of this shit is normal. You know, we're all we're all work we're not we're working from home because we have to, not because we want to. They're learning from home because they have to también, so it's like I can't even imagine being me, at eighth grade or in my senior year, having to do all this work remotely, you know and then assignment after assignment after assignment after assignment, and my teacher not giving me a break or not putting himself or herself in my shoes, you know. And I think, when you mention you got to let them give you feedback on the curriculum, right? Apply that to everything else. Let people give you feedback. Let people give you feedback in the classroom on how you can best support them, and I guarantee you that things are gonna get a little bit better. Let family members give you feedback on how do you support them the best, and the relationships are gonna strengthen up, right? Let upcoming leaders, activists, right? Let them come into the space and give them that feedback, right? Or let them give you feedback on how to improve something, and things are gonna get better. And I think that's the key right there, allowing people to have the space to speak, to talk freely without consequences at work, at home, in your organizing space, in your relationship, and things are definitely going to get better, you know. But it seems like, there's still a lot of work to do, and you all are right, there's a lot of trauma that we're all carrying, you know. There's a lot of things that we're realizing. There's a lot of, you know, realization on how all these systems are affecting us on a day-to-day basis, and how incompetent people like number 45, you know, how people like him can just ruin our lives, you know. And it's so much to process. It's so much to process. And I think, I have a lot of faith in this new generation of folks, these youngsters who are organizing, who are advocating, you know. And I know that if we give them the tools and the resources and the space to organize, then they're going to make the changes that we weren't able to make, right? And I truly, truly believe that, and I truly believe on this new generation of leadership that's coming up. So
Yeah, it's definitely a hard position when I can only imagine how, the students can't collaborate with each other physically. Let's say there is a special activity that was for improving their social skills or improving scenarios that maybe the teacher might provide. It's not the same talking over like a Zoom meeting or something. It's not. There's no activities. I forgot what the word is for the activities right now at the moment, but there's like special events that used to there's field trips that people used to take to learn hands on, like these things that we talked about in the classroom, and then there's special events that take place in, let's say, middle school, high school, even at colleges and all that. There's no more of that communication in physical form, between those activities that people, even the satisfaction of graduation. How good does that feel to walk up onto that stage and be in front of all your family members, like I can only remember like how good that felt. Like, I'm showing my parents I accomplished this. So it's not the same when it's just like, oh, we're gonna call your name over a Zoom meeting. you know and then we're gonna send you the little piece of paper through via mail. Yeah, I mean, you do receive it via mail, even when it was still walking on stage, but it's not the same feeling.
Yeah, and I think just like bringing it back to, like, you mentioned our guiding question was, how has power dynamics played a role in professional and personal life? I think just kind of what we all kind of just talked about. Power can be challenged. Power can be challenged. Whether that's number 45, like David, you called, whether it's like doctors who are allowing innocent people, black women being killed, die because of birth, whether that it's my district leaders, my the CEOs of our district, or whether that's teachers and the power that they have, right? I think, just it can be challenged, all of it. And I think we're just taught that we just have to be quiet, put our head down, and continue walking. Y- Aunque nos chinguen, like, and I'll do that with, I'll be respectful of my family, my mom, my dad, like, they're scary to me, they're more scary than 45 to me, you know, like 28 years old and I'm still have a hard time saying no to them, But professionally, nope, sorry, you can't do that. So it's a trip, but yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I can also point out like those people facing trauma as far as a certain situation, they're afraid. Sometimes they're afraid to speak out just because they don't want to relive that situation again. So in itself, it's a tough thing to process. You know, it takes time, and it's not going to be like, oh, I'm gonna change from tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, I'm gonna be different. No, it's lives with you now. You know, it's in your head, and it's okay to take a moment every now and then within the day and just reflect. You know, because that's your own sanity at that when you're going throughout your work days. So for everyone listening, you know, if you work your 5 days a week, 6 days a week, you know, try to take that time aside, let's say at night or something, reflect on what you did during the day and just pause, meditate for a little bit even. You know, it's good to take that little 30 minutes or even just like a 1 minute breather on your break or something. You know, it's your life out here, you know, because you know you value your work, you know, but then what good does it do you if you're not if you can't do it anymore because you became ill? So definitely taking the time for yourself is more important.
Definitely, definitely. Cash in those sick days. Cash in that vacation time. You know, it's self care is important. Self care is important. You know, it's part of the process of challenging power dynamics. You know, I really do believe it's part of the process. You know, to make things better, not just for yourself, right? Which is should be the primary point, I believe, right? But also for people around you, people who you work with, people who you work for, right? And when I say for, it's like it could be your students, it could be a client, right? Um, you don't know, not necessarily for the big guy, right? Um, but you know, for yourself primarily, because you want to be in that
Hmm.
space where it's like you're able to do what you love to do, right? So just I don't know. Power dynamics is a whole trip from, you know, at home, having to deal with it at home, to being out there in the community organizing, to politics. It's just it's messy, it's complicated, um, and not everybody wants to talk about it and do something about it. But you know, I think doing it for yourself at the beginning is a good start. You know, doing it for yourself at the beginning, and then moving on, like you said, Susie, having these conversations with your family, with your siblings, right? And making sure that your circle, your inner circle, is doing better, right? Because that's what you want. You want them to do better for themselves. So it's a trip, folks. It's a trip.
Yeah.
You know, like even though this is we've been in this whole thing for like since March or so, it feels like just last month we were just getting into this. You know, it's been so long, but uh, just learning about the space around you in that moment and thinking of how I can better myself. Like you said, David, better version of myself. You know, try to do things a little bit different. Try to um, uplift your own spirit.
Hmm. I don't know where I heard this from, but I it was just doing things out of love, right? Doing things out of love, holding someone accountable out of love, say no out of love, taking on responsibilities, again, out of love, respecting yourself, everything, centered around that. I know someone one time, like, was saying, well, end, you can't end like police brutality out of love. And I was like, yes, definitely. That's a whole different, thing. But again, just like it starts, like you said, David, it starts home, right? It starts with us, right? It starts in acknowledging our trauma and like how do we need to like love ourselves, and practice that self-care that you both are talking about. Because yes, this work is needs to be sustainable, right? It needs to be sustainable so we can see some changes and not like see less people being burned out.
So to not end in a such a gloomy vibe here, so let's end on a perfect note and let's do a challenge for better version of ourselves. Let's end on that note. with one challenge that we would say to do for everyone who's listening is find out how to better your week. So let's say you've had a tough week, 6 days a week you've been working 9 to 5, let's say. Try to meditate or just catch yourself and let's say put time in for yourself. That's one thing I would challenge for everyone here listening. And I'll hold myself accountable for that too. Because I find myself sometimes getting angry over that I have to work again tomorrow. I have to wake up early again. So let's try to look at it a different route and not so in let's try to look at a different route and try not to impose so much hate into what we do. Because we're fortunate to be have a job at the moment.
I think my challenge for me, I'm a very yes person. So I need to say no a couple times this upcoming week so I can take care of myself. A ver, David,
I'm trying to think of I'm trying to think of a challenge.
I would say another thing, another one that you can put out for people is go on a walk or go on a hike, go to the beach or something. Take an hour of your day, if possible, of course. Because everyone's situation is different. But just take that hour or so to try to get yourself away from the current situation you're at, and just live in that moment. Meditate again, like I was saying before, and just try to be at peace, with yourself, because you need to uplift your own self being.
Folks, I think the colegas have given you some great examples, right, on how to take care of yourself.
what about you, David? Talking about leadership, right, and how we need to hold each other accountable. You can't get away with like not practicing self care, David.
um, self love, self love. I'm gonna take the time for myself. I'm gonna get away from the weekend. Like I know I have some personal things that I need to take care of on Monday, right? Um, but this weekend is gonna be for me. So I'm gonna do that. Um, in mind that I still gotta take care of some challenging things, but this weekend is for me. So folks, you got a couple challenges. Take a weekend for you. Go out on a walk. Go out on a hike. Say no to people. Right. Do it for yourself. Um, if you go out on a hike, if you go to the beach, again, being safe, self distance, wearing your mask. Go ahead and tag us. Tag Cafecito Con Conciencia. Use a hashtag. Let us know what you're doing. Right. Show some love. Right. We want to make sure that you're doing well. We want to make sure that you're feeling better, and just go out there, enjoy a breather, and we'll be back again next time. So, thank you all for joining again, for listening to us. And maybe one day you are going to see how we get started with, people laughing at me for having bad Wi Fi and, just laughing too much. But, anyways, thank you all for joining me and my folks, my colegas here. So, peace out, take care, and we'll see you again next week.